Focusing on ourself, being concerned with ourself and getting what we need is not the problem. It's the problem when we become out of balance and we don't develop the other side of the coin.
Hello, and welcome to the Friendly Circle Berlin Monday Workshop. My name is Patrick, and tonight, Dr. Alan Berger, our good friend, is back with us, and the theme is emotional sobriety, aiming for the best possible attitude. Steps 6 and 7. Alan's going to do a deep dive into those steps from the lens of emotional sobriety. And thank you, Alan, for all you do for us.
Thank you very much, Patrick, and it's great to be here with you again. So today we're going to take as Patrick was saying, a dive into steps 6 and 7. Let me just say a few things about the steps in general before we get to steps 6 and 7. First of all, I think a lot of people say, and I think with good reason, that the steps seem to be divinely inspired. And the inspiration is not just from a spiritual point of view, but also as I look at them as a psychologist, from a psychological point of view, they have captured an incredible, powerful methodology for helping us deal with some very serious problems in our life. As all of you know, it's the 12 steps have been adapted to all kinds of issues now. There's Gamblers Anonymous, Food Addicts Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, Marijuana Anonymous, Codependence Anonymous. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Narcotics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Addicts Anonymous now. I mean, there's all kinds of different programs. And variations of these have shown up in like Celebrate Recovery. So Bill's definitely harnessed an incredible, powerful experience of change. And if we look at the process that's involved, before I get into discussing steps 6 and 7 specifically, what we see is that the steps, if from an energy point of view, follow what's called a charge-discharge process. The first step creates an incredibly powerful charge. When we admit we're powerless over our addiction, over alcoholism, or our alcohol, or whatever the issue may be, that our lives have become unmanageable, that puts us in direct confrontation with the fact that we have a serious problem that we don't know how to deal with. Well, that reality, as those of you that have heard me talk about this before, creates an existential crisis. I've got this serious problem that's going to have an incredibly destructive and deleterious effect on my life, and I don't know what to do about it. So I'm letting go of one thing, but I don't have anything yet to replace it. And it throws me into this position of being incredibly hopeless. And Bill says that recovery is based upon a pedestal of hopelessness. So that hopelessness isn't a bad thing in terms of the program. It's an important experience because that hopelessness is what creates the charge. You see, that existential crisis creates a very powerful desire to get that resolved. And so step 1 prepares us for what happens in step 2. We feel this charge, I'm hopeless, I've got this serious problem, I don't know what to do. Step 2 comes along, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And step 2 creates hope. And that resolves the existential crisis. There is a solution for me. I can be restored to sound thinking. When we think of, I came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, it means that our thinking has not been sound. We've been insane, which is our thinking has not been been well at all. We've created a serious, serious problem in our life, the way that we looked at things and the way we live our life. Because it's not just about, being unmanaged or being powerless over alcohol or other drugs or whatever it is, but it's also that there are forces inside of us that has created a life that's unmanageable. So this continues on. In the first step, creates a charge. It's resolved in step 2. Now, step 2 creates its own charge. There's hope, but hope without action, faith without action is meaningless. So now we have to get into action. So step 3 comes along and says, okay, there is a possibility, there is a way that you can be restored to sanity, but you're going to have to make a decision. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God, not over to God, but to the care of God as we understood him. So now step 2 is another resolution of the charge created in step 2, but now creates a new charge because we've made a decision, and now what are we going to do with that decision? Now we get into tangible evidence of our commitment, and that's step 4. And so the steps keep building on that. Steps 4, then, we've made a commitment, made a decision to turn our lives over. We're told what to do. Sit down and take a fearless and thorough moral inventory of yourself, looking at the exact nature of our wrongs. And so we sit down and we really take a look at who we are. And maybe for the first time, if we become willing to confront ourselves and look at the things that are not easy to look at about ourselves, we're learning that this is a very important part of living a different life. Now, when we look at emotional sobriety, we take these steps from a very different point of view. We call it the second first step and the second working of all the steps. So this time, we're looking at how our emotional dependency, how we're powerless over that, and how it's created this unmanageability in our life. We come to believe that we can grow up is step 2. Step 3 is make a commitment to that. And in step 4, we make an inventory of that emotional dependency and the impact it's had on our life and all the different ways it's manifested. And then we sit down, and so that's the charge was created, made a decision, we execute, or that charge is resolved in step 4. But now just self-reflection is not going to create change. We have to share this with another person and get feedback, someone we trust. I call that person an enlightened witness. So now there's a charge built in step 4. It's resolved when we share it in step 5. And now we've faced all of these issues that we see that our emotional dependency has caused in our life. That's what it looks like when we go back and work the steps from this perspective of looking at our emotional dependency and what in the emotional sobriety world we've come to call environmental support. So now we turn to step 6, right? Step 5, we've shared all these things. We've faced ourselves. Now what are we going to do about it? Well, now we begin what I call the pivot towards learning to live differently. Steps 6 and 7 are pivots towards emotional sobriety, towards developing the skills and the perspective to live our life in a different way, to live our life in a way that creates freedom. So, steps 6 and 7 are our pivot steps. They're pivoting towards emotional sobriety. So let me share my slides with you now. Bill said it this way in the 12 and 12. Oh, no, this was, yes, on page 65 in the 12 and 12. He says, step 6 is AA's way of stating the best possible attitude one can take to make a beginning on this lifetime job. Now, remember, when Bill talked about the effect of all of these steps, that the outcome of working the 12 steps is the achievement of emotional sobriety. He said it when he's describing step 12. He says, if we practice the principles of the 12 steps in our daily lives, that we and those about us find emotional sobriety. So the achievement of emotional sobriety is the goal of working the steps. That is after we put the plug in the jug, or we break the bonds of our addiction. So we're going to be talking about, well, what is the best possible attitude that we can take towards ourselves, towards our relationships with others, the best possible attitude we could take towards our problems and the troubles that we experience in life, the best possible attitude we could take towards our relationship with the higher power, as well as the best possible attitude we can take towards life. That's the pivot. That's what we're looking to be able to do with step number 6 and 7, is developing that best possible attitude. He says the key words here are entirely ready, underlying the fact that we want to aim at the very best we know or can learn. Well, we're not looking at the very best we know, because we understand that the consciousness that has created our problems is not going to be able to solve it. The way Gurdjieff, a Russian philosopher, says, he says, we're all asleep dreaming we're awake. And he says, and the things that put you to sleep cannot wake you up. You need to learn some new things. So this is about learning to live differently. And one of the things that you've heard me say as well is that I believe that we're stuck. We're not sick. We don't suffer from a mental illness. Yes, that doesn't mean some of us don't have a comorbidity. But in terms of this issue, is we are stuck in our development. And we're stuck in our development because we never continued on past the very early stage of development. And where we're stuck at is that we are stuck at the it's all about me stage of development. We are very self-centered, selfishness, self-will run riot. We think that is the root of our problem, because it is. This all about me creates a very, very difficult way to be in this world, in addition to viewing ourselves more objectively. That's the second thing, is that we live in cultures that promote I am more the more I have. So instead of looking at my development of my character, I judge my success by what I have. Do I have beauty? Do I have wealth? Do I have cars? Do I have this? Do I have that achievement? And we measure our sense of self. Now, I'm not putting those things down. I'm not saying that we need to give all of that up. But Bill talks a lot about being in balance with this stuff. There's nothing wrong with having, I enjoy nice things in my life, but I also am concerned with who I am and being in this world in a different way. And that's what emotional sobriety is concerned with, about being balanced and by focusing on who we are and how we show up in our lives and how we deal with our lives. So any person capable of enough willingness and honesty to try repeatedly step 6 on all his faults without any reservations whatever, had indeed come a long way spiritually. You see, what we understand is that the practice of self-examination, of being able to be honest with ourselves and take the hits about who we are and what we've experienced, and starting to address the issues we have avoided our entire life, become so important in the process that we're looking at here. So even the best of us will discover to our dismay that there is always a sticking point, resistance I call it, a point which we say, no, I can't give this up yet. What we must recognize now is that we exult in some of our defects. We really love them. Today I was working with a person who has been working really, really diligently on trying to let go of the way that she's adapted to dealing with certain issues in her life. We'll call it her false self. And as she tries to let go of that, she becomes highly anxious. Because you see, those things that we call character defects, we like to refer to them as character defaults, right? Because we've defaulted to them as because they've helped us adapt to challenging situations. Those things served a function. They were the best possible choice that we had available to us at the time we developed those coping mechanisms. And as we let go of them, they were designed to resolve our anxiety, to help us feel okay to whatever degree we could, given the circumstances that we were struggling with. So now, as we go to let go of some of those, until we can really make that transformation and that transition to some new behavior, we're going to feel some anxiety when we start looking at giving them up, because they have worked for us and we don't have total faith that we're going to be okay yet. So since most of us are born with an abundance of natural desires, it isn't strange that we let these far exceed their intended purposes. That's true. Focusing on ourselves, being concerned with ourselves and getting what we need is not the problem. It's the problem when we become out of balance and we don't develop the other side of the coin. You see, we define emotional sobriety as learning to act for ourselves without being selfish. It's a natural desire to please and cooperate with other people. So the I is important. Being aware of yourself and advocating for yourself and trying to get your needs met is a healthy thing in this world. The other side is doing for other people and giving to other people is also important. But once again, if we do that and we lose ourselves, then we pay too much of a price for it. So what we say, while we say act for yourself without being selfish, we also say do something for others, give to others without losing yourself. That's the balance we're striving for, to correct this skew that we've developed in our development. When these desires drive us blindly, it's all about me or it's all about everybody else, or we willfully demand that they supply us with more satisfactions or pleasures than they are possible, or that are possible or due us. That is the point we depart from a sense of balance. We depart from the degree of perfection that God wishes for us here on earth. That is the measure of our character defects. What Bill is saying, that I believe, is that what God has given us is the ability to be able to act for ourselves without being selfish, and the ability to act for others without losing ourselves. But when our development gets delayed, we don't achieve that. This does not mean we expect our character defects to be lifted from us, he says. A few of them may be, but with most of them, we will just have to be content with patient improvement. This becomes so important. No one among us is going to get all of this stuff straightened out, quickly. It's going to take time and effort and patience. And we have to have that idea that we need to endure our discomfort. And if we can, it will be meaningful. We will experience some incredible changes in our life, because now we start to learn from our experience and we start to mature and grow up. So, every character defect, or what we call a character default, has three purposes to it. The first is that it economizes our distress. We cannot go on if we are overwhelmed with anxiety. So a character defect is a way of containing that anxiety, of bonding it or binding it. It also is a cry for help, meaning that we're saying to the world, and I'll give you an example of this in a minute, that I'm limited here because of the way I dealt with this one at a very young age. And it also, the cry for help and what we've done reveals the nature of our personal distress and what we need for a cure to heal our wound. So I'll give you an example that I use all the time because I think it's so illustrative. is that I was working with a gentleman. I used to give lectures at the Torrance National Council on Alcoholism. And on Saturday mornings, I would give these lectures from 10 to 12. And they were well attended. A lot of people came. And this one fellow showed up week after week. He started coming because he was in the DUI program. And he just continued on afterwards. And he started to really get into his recovery. But week after week, he would wear the same T-shirt. And on it, it says, before you even ask, the answer is no. Before you even ask, the answer is no. Wow, interesting, huh? So, obviously, he was rigid. See, character defects create a stereotype or rigidity. And things have to be a certain way for us to be okay. That's the I'm okay if syndrome manifesting itself. So for him, when he said no, he economized his distress. Well, what distress did he economize? The fact that when you say yes or you say no, you have to make a decision. And you have to weigh out a lot of different considerations in terms of making your decision. And the challenge is how do we know if it's the right decision or not? You see, that makes a lot of people highly anxious. But if it's already done, and before you ask, the answer is no, he doesn't have to worry about that. He didn't have to worry about struggling with, is this the right thing or not? Because it didn't matter to him, because it was always a no. Now, at the same time, what he's telling us is that he's stuck. He's stuck in his no. It's a cry for help. It's that he can't enjoy life and to be able to fully show up in life because he's trying to control it all the time. Now, what does it reveal the nature of his distress? Well, very likely no one ever said yes to him growing up. He never experienced what it was like to make a decision like that. His parents always said no to him. So what does he need? First of all, he needs to become aware of what he's doing, and he also needs somebody to say yes to him. So important. So I remember sometimes I would ask families to come up and do some work if we had some time left in the lecture, and he came up with his daughters. He had 3 daughters. They were like 13, 15, and 17. And his wife was there. And they started out, they say, Dad, we got something to talk to you about. Is that your shirt is how you are with us. We don't ever want to come to you for anything because we know what the answer is ahead of time. So we go to Mom. And they said, you get mad at us for that, but you've created it. And they're pointing out to him how he did create it by saying no all the time. And as we went on, I said to them that, I don't think anybody's ever said yes to your dad. What if you guys just tried something and said yes to him right now and told him how much you cared for him and how important he is to you? And let's see what that does. And as they started to share this to him, this tough, big guy started to break down in tears. And he had never been met with that kind of softness before, with that kind of availability to him. It was very powerful. Very, very powerful. If we would gain any real advantage in the use of this step on problems other than alcohol, we shall need to make a brand new venture into open-mindedness. We shall raise our eyes towards perfection and be ready to walk in that direction. Now, people are surprised at this because when he says raise our eyes towards perfection, this program isn't about becoming perfect. It's about making progress, right? There's no such thing as spiritual perfection. Dr. Kempler gave me some insight into this. He was my mentor. He says, Alan, there's nothing wrong with striving for perfection as long as you never fool yourself into thinking you can achieve it. As long as you keep humility, then keeping your eyes towards aiming at the best possible attitude that you can have, aiming at maturing yourself is an important goal to set in your mind. We need to start here with the end in mind, and that's what Bill is talking about. He says, how very easy, sure, I will head towards perfection, but I'm certainly not going to hurry any. Maybe I could postpone dealing with some of my problems indefinitely. Of course, this won't do, since a bluffing of oneself will have to go the way of any other pleasant rationalizations. At the very least, we shall have to come to grips with some of our worst character defects and take action towards their removal as quickly as possible. That's what makes this step so important. Patrick, in the beginning, in kind of a joking way, says steps 6 and 7 are the Passover steps. And that's oftentimes because people don't really understand the importance of sitting down and really working with these steps, because they are very important. So, as he said, we do not expect all of our character defects to be lifted. It is a way of stating the best possible attitude we can take for this journey, meaning a commitment to continue to grow and to take responsibility for ourselves. He says we may never be entirely ready to have our character defects removed, but we can strive for this ideal. How? By increasing our awareness of what we are doing and asking ourselves, is this enhancing my way of life or diminishing it? So, developing the best possible attitude we can for this journey. Well, what does that mean? This raises the question of what is the best possible attitude? And we're going to approach that question by looking at what attitudes we move away from and what attitudes we need to move towards. So what do we move away from in our life, and what do we want to move towards? So what we move away from is being someone we think we should be. This is the false self that you hear me talk about from time to time. That early on in our lives, because of our anxiety that we're not going to be loved and we're not going to be accepted, we're not going to belong, we conclude that if I can become who I think I should be, I will be okay. Everything will work out. My life will be just grand and fine. I'll be satisfied and content. So when we make that decision, which unfolds over a period of time, we now dedicate our lives to actualizing this concept of who we should be, the false self, rather than actualizing who we really are. So our energy goes towards being someone we're not. When we are the way we think we should be, we feel a certain kind of what I like to call false pride. God, I was great, man. I handled that situation in the exact way I think I should. If I do something I think I shouldn't do, then I feel shame. And I start hating myself. And I start to beat myself up to try to keep myself in line with my shoulds. This is why we say as soon as you try to become someone that you're not, your life becomes tyrannized by a set of shoulds. And you could get some idea of what that set of shoulds are if you stand back and you look at all the shoulds that govern your life. And you can do that by taking a piece of paper and at the top of it, and do these for different parts. So first of all, for yourself. I should be, and write down all the things that come to mind. Then you do it for relationships. My partner should be, or my friend should be, and write down all the shoulds that you have for them. God should be, do it for God. Life should be. Get in touch with all these things are, because the more you stoke your awareness, the more you cultivate and promote your awareness of what you're doing, the more change becomes possible, because change is paradoxical. We change when we own what we're doing, not when we try to become someone we're not. At the same time, step 6 and 7 is a pivot towards being who we actually are, towards authenticity, towards being committed to becoming, I need to really say it differently, on recovering our lost true self. That's the way I like to think about it. So now the quest comes with step 6 and 7 is pivoting towards the vision of developing, and this is the goal, a solid and flexible sense of self. A solid and flexible sense of self is the goal of emotional sobriety. That's how we create freedom. And we'll, in the future talks that I have, we'll talk a lot about what goes into developing that sense of self. But all of these things contribute to developing that kind of sense of self. Focusing on ourself, being concerned with ourself and getting what we need is not the problem. What we move away from is a belief that says I'm okay when we become out of balance, and that's we don't belief that was started early on in our life. That life is supposed to be a certain way, and if life is that way, I will be fine. A corollary of this belief is I would have been okay if. If this didn't happen to me, I would have been okay. Which is another, false idea, false belief. I'm okay if, and if this didn't happen to me, I'd be okay if, says that our life depends on things being a certain way for us to be okay. And that belief I call the big lie, because it diminishes the role that we can play in our own lives in creating a much better existence. And that's what we move towards. We move towards a belief that says I am okay even if. This is the belief that makes us curious about developing our best possible response to whatever challenges life sets before us. That's why we don't think of problems as really problems. Problems become problems based on the way we cope with them and the meaning we give to them. And so there's a whole way in emotional sobriety that trouble and problems really is another opportunity to take the next step in your growth and development. Such a refreshing shift of perspective. We move away from environmental support, looking for our environment to make us okay. Now, it's true that early on in life, we start with complete environmental support. When you were in your mother's womb and being taken care of, you depended 100% on her for everything that you needed to start your development and your growth in this world. Your mother provided you with the oxygen, the nutrients, the proteins, all the things that your body needed to grow. You got transportation. She was a 24-hour Uber. She provided security for you. The whole works. Everything was done for you. You had complete environmental support. The minute we are born, we take the first step towards our ability to support ourselves. And that first step is taken by learning to breathe. We take the first step towards self-support by taking the first breath. And when I inhale the oxygen from my environment, I now take over that role of providing the oxygen for myself rather than breathing through the umbilical cord that my mother had attached to me. What we move towards is self-support. That's the life force inside of us. I believe that that's God-given, that God wants us to become what we can be, to become holy. And I think of that as W-H-O-L-E, also H-O-L-E, or H-O-L-Y, if you think about it from a spiritual point of view. That's what's God-given to us, is that we have the ability to stand on our own 2 feet and be the determining force in our own lives, instead of being so controlled by all these forces that are being lived within us. Well, I wanted to save some time. It's almost 2:15 now. I wanted to stop here and